In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful day. Amazing weather today. Clouds were amazing. Catch the clouds in the sky. That's where they normally live. But yeah, the clouds. Amazing clouds today. At least here. But we're not supposed to pay attention to the clouds. We're supposed to focus on the sun, right?
No, we're not supposed to discriminate that way, are we?
That's right. The clouds are the play of the sun or something like that, the sky. Anyway, I am under the erroneous belief that we're in this section called the cultivation of samadhi, shamatha. See, got that wrong already. Shamatha by Karma Chakme. I have a feeling that we're on or about 159. How do other people feel? Just before the Nirmanakaya. Rob, all right. Cool. Okay, so we'll dive in. This is an amazing text. The next one is even better. So we'll just see how long it takes. Or we'll take it however long it takes. That I meant. Sustaining the attention on the Nirmanakaya. So here we have a focus on, going back to the bottom of the last page. There are 4 techniques for sustaining the attention. Sustaining the attention on Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, and without any referent. Sustaining the attention on the Nirmanakaya. Now envision this enlightened representation, or the pebble, lotus, or stick, as a small enlightened body. The Bhagavan, the Nirmanakaya, Shakyamuni, just 4 finger widths in height. Single-pointedly focus your mind on that, and for just a moment stay there without distraction. He doesn't say where to visualize this, so it's presumably like in the space in front of you. Now just for a moment, hold your attention on the coil of hair on Shakyamuni's forehead. The coil is like one of his marks. It's the cowlick, sometimes called the cowlick. I think it like goes the other direction from what is common or something. There's something unique about it, but it's a little bit odd. Now just for a moment, direct your mind to the eternity knot on Shakyamuni's chest. Knot of eternity, isn't that cool? He's got tattoos. He was into tattoos way early. Now focus your mind on the Vajra in front of Shakyamuni. Now hold your attention on Shakyamuni's entire bodies, changing the referent. The meaning of this is stated in Kamalashila's Bhavana Yogavatara. So this is a different text. I'm not familiar with this text. Interesting. Entry into the union of Bhavana, meditation, cultivation. It could just be a different way of referring to the same text, but cultivate an attraction for an enlightened form of the Buddha, yellow like refined gold, adorned with its signs and symbols emitting rays of light. Get rid of desires and the afflictions of the mind, and keep the body straight and erect. Place in front of you a cast metal statue or painting of such an enlightened form. If you attend to it continually, you will perceptually see that very form completely, or else see it completely by way of its limbs and so on. Which I think the distinction is either all at once, or you can build it up. from limb to limb, and then gradually the whole thing, which are generally the two ways of visualizing, either all at once or you build up from one part after another. And that becomes an object on which you can focus, rely on it without distraction, uninterruptedly throughout the day and night. If the mind becomes lax or excited and so forth, or tight, take delight in yearning for the sublime qualities of the Buddha. Practice diligently in that way. By doing so, by so doing, you will succeed. This is a practice that's presented in the Samadhi Raja Sutra, I believe. It's an interesting practice. We don't really do this sort of practice of yearning for the sublime qualities of the Buddha. I guess we do that when we do deity yoga practice. Moreover, if the mind lacking clarity becomes lax and dull, sustain your attention on the Buddha's crown protrusion, his Ushnisha. You've seen that, like it's like a little raised stupa on top of his head, like a coil, like the dreadlock coils or something, coiled up on top of his head. If your mind cannot be made to settle down due to strong scattering and excitation, direct your attention to the Buddha's navel. Rob is demonstrating, showing it to us. Yeah, cool. That's the Ushnisha. Is there a little coil in the front of his forehead? Like different from the rest of his head?
There's a raised spot in between his eyes.
Oh, yeah, that's the third eye. That's not the coil on his forehead.
But there's no coil. I mean, the hair is done in the same knobby-like fashion all around the whole head, and then it builds
Right.
up like a stupa on top.
Yeah, cool. Cool hairdo. Let's see. Direct your attention to the Buddha's navel, the soles of his feet, or the edge of his seat. That's an interesting one. The edge of his seat. If there's no laxity or excitation, sustain your attention on the eternity knot in the Buddha's chest. Then that constitutes sustaining the mind on the Nirmanakaya. So instead of a lotus or a stick or a pebble, we focus on the magnificent form of the Buddha, the Nirmanakaya version of the Buddha. On 160 now, sustaining the attention on the Sambhogakaya, then you may place in front of you a pebble or a stick, or it is also suitable if you do not. On either case, imagine the Bhagavan Vajrasattva, his body white in color, holding a Vajran bell 4 finger widths in height, adorned with silks and jewels, and seated in the Bodhisattvasana, which I think is where one leg is sort of out, one foot is extended, like jumping into the world, ready to help sentient beings. Sustaining your attention on him, encircle him with your mind as much as you can. Now to give a clear explanation of the teachings on the 9 stages of mental stillness as taught in the sutras by the Bhagavan. So it's one wonders, like, is it just like coincidental that he introduces the 9 stages during the focus on the Sambhogakaya? Or does it indicate something? That's like, why here? Anyway, it goes through the 9, which we've seen many times, and it's not that different than what we've seen before. Maybe we'll go through it quickly just so we memorize these. Placement, the mind is focused single-pointedly in a light form or stick and so on. Thorough placement, attention is maintained continuously for a protracted period. Definite placement, if the mind is scattered by conceptualization, it is immediately restrained with mindfulness and settled in meditative equipoise. So you notice you're thinking, you come back. Immediately, close placement, the mind in meditative equipoise is fused with the previous locus of attention and placed in equipoise. The mind of meditative equipoise is fused with the previous locus of attention and placed in equipoise. That's a little unclear. Is the previous locus of attention the object? Or is it like a way of saying that one just repeats the same mental experience from moment to moment?
So they may be carrying forward the emphasis on attention from the second one, just, because there is some sort of progression.
Yeah, but the locus is the key here.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
confusing term. Subduing delight is brought forth from being clearly mindful of the fine qualities of sustained attention and resting in that state, experiencing joy in meditation from the relief from the barrage, pacifying the individual conditions that lead to scattering off to the specific objects are ascertained, and by rejecting craving for them, attention is sustained. So as we notice our mind drifting off, we identify what it's attracted to, and we dissolve that attachment, and thereby bring the mind back to its attention, fully pacifying each of the causes of distraction, such as avarice, and all the results of distraction, such as unpleasant feelings, are recognized in their essential nature, and they are released in themselves. So I'll go drilling further into the causes of distraction and identifying the sort of underlying stress that causes them, and relaxing them and releasing that tension that causes them. 8, unification of the mind stream. By the power of such meditation, the mind automatically engages with the meditative objects. You sit down and boom, you're in deep samadhi. Or bam, and it remains there without reliance upon strong effort. Meditative equipoise. Finally, there's no distraction either during meditative equipoise or when not meditating. Those are the 9 stages of mental stillness. The practice is devoted to the Nirmanakaya Sabokakaya entail, the mind apprehending something external. So it's just like this scheme applies to all of these 4 types of sustaining shamatha. And the first 2 are just externally oriented focus practices. Interestingly, they don't. When they go through the 9 stages, they don't ever. Rarely do you see them say, and then you enter into the perfection of shamatha after that, which in some places we are told is that there's like this 10th stage that is the completion of shamatha that surpasses the 9 stages, that's imbued with pliancy. C, sustaining the attention on the Dharmakaya, then for the mind to apprehend inwardly at the center of your heart. Imagine the Dharmakaya, Vajradhara. Okay, so I had asked earlier where these forms, the Bhagavan was placed that we were visualizing. So now we know it's external. And now we're shifting to the internal. Vajradhara is body deep blue and the size of the outer thumb joint. The outer thumb joint must be the furthest from the hand. Holding a Vajra and bell crossed at his heart, seated in the Vajrasana on a lotus and moon seat, and adorned with silks and jewel, the usual way the Vajradhara appears in most of the iconography. Do your best to sustain your attention on this without distraction. Now, serene refers to calming the mind from being drawn away to various thoughts. The vivid stillness of the mind wherever it is focused is shamatha. So the footnotes, the serene, like initially I thought, oh, he's like referring to some root text that he's explaining, but no, he's glossing the term shamatha, which in Tibetan is shi, ne, these 2 syllables, and the meaning of the first one is serene or pacified or peaceful, referring to calming the mind from being drawn away to various thoughts. And the vivid stillness is ne. Ne is like place or placement or sort of established in that, in one place.
I thought this was really cool. That was the first time I've ever seen that.
Oh,
that
the
little
gloss of shamatha.
yeah, that was nice.
Oh, that's funny. That's the first time I'm pretty sure I've seen that, but it is a nice way of explaining it. And finally, shamatha without the sign, which was the fourth way of sustaining shamatha. Then for shamatha without a sign, focus your mind on samatha bhadra. Oh, we shifted from the Dharmakaya of the new translation schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Kagyu, Sakya, Geluk, to the Vajradhara, to the Dharmakaya of the Nyingma traditions, Samatha Bhadra, who is emptiness, devoid of form, called substantiality. How do you focus your mind on something that is without form, color, or substantiality? Do not imagine or think about anything in the mind. That's how. It's the opposite of focusing on something or doing something. Do not pursue traces from the past. Don't anticipate the future. Talopa's famous 6 precepts. Relax simply without distraction in the consciousness of the present. Oh, he didn't eliminate the present. Without rejecting or affirming anything, relax and rest. I guess this is shamatha, so it's okay to rest in the present. And let Vipassana dispel the belief of there being a present, that there being so much to rest in it. The Bhadra Karatri Sutra states, don't follow up the past, have no hopes for the future. Varta Chakra Sutra states the mind of the past not found, likewise for the present, achieve equanimity regarding events in the present, sounding or moshana. The source says, Maitreya says, Bhagavan, what sort of shamatha objects are there? Bhagavan, he replied, there is one, it has the form of non-conceptualization. So this is interesting because in another part of that Q&A in that 8th chapter of the Sounding Emotional Sutra, the Buddha goes into the 4 groups of objects for samadhi. So somehow the term that's being used here for objects must be different than what's used when he responds with a list of 4. Anyway, I always want to cultivate this singular shamatha, singular because there's only one object, which is the form of non-conceptualization. How could non-conceptualization have a form? It's sort of more like the object of the form that's the object of a non-conceptual consciousness or cognition. When, with continuous mental engagement, uninterruptedly attending to the actual nature of the mind, there is samadhi uninterrupted by laxity or excitation, that is flawless mental engagement with the actual nature of the mind. So that seems like a pretty clear indication of the stage of shamatha without object. Non-conceptualization, tending to the actual nature of the mind, which is how Kongtrul describes this 3rd phase. He says, shamatha on the nature of the mind. Whereas Tashi Namgyal in Moonbeams later says, actually Tashi Namgyal is before Kongtrul. Sorry, Tashi Namgyal says, he says without support. He doesn't say resting in that shamatha in the nature of the mind, which is what Kongtrul says in his Treasury of Knowledge chapter. Anyway, the Prajnaparamita Samchaya Gata states, one of the earliest Prajnaparamita texts, bodhisattvas who do not focus upon the limits of the past, the limits of the future, or the events of the present, purify the 3 times. So when they say the limits, this term, the limits, it's an odd term. It's anta, like we have this text, Madhyanta Vibhanga, which is Vibhanga is a term we've seen a lot, and it's discriminating. And Madhyanta is like Madhyamaka, it's sort of a similar, it has the same root. And so that's the center, Madhyanta, mud, and then Yanta is the extremes, like center and extremes, or center and fringe, we might say, for a mandala. But some translators say the extent or the extremes, or use this term, the limits, which is an odd term. Like, what's the limits of the past, the limit of the future? And it's either a way of indicating like the furthest extent of the past, like, the beginning of the past and the end of the future, or it's like more talking about the extent of the past, like the sort of limitless, really the limitlessness of the past and the future. But it's an interesting phrase. Purifying the three times helps you figure out that, we're not like fixating upon, in what way is the past limited? That's not really the point here. Right? They experience the unconditioned without elaboration. They experience supreme, transcendent wisdom, prajna paramita. Kala chakra, the root tantra. So there's many different types of tantras. There's generally two. There's the root tantra and an explanatory tantra. And this is the root, Mahamudra, withdrawal. Pratyahara has the defining characteristic of empty space. So pratyahara is this essential early stage of yoga practice in the Buddhist tradition, and also in the tradition of Patanjali. If you've ever read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, who, it's unclear what his affiliation was. He may have been Buddhist, in fact, but it's the idea of withdrawing all the senses internally and withdrawing the winds and the energies internally instead of dispersing them externally by looking out, or searching outside, so to speak. And it can be done intentionally through yogic practices, or it can happen over time through shamatha without even like knowing what you're doing. Gradually we withdraw from the object of our attention until we're resting in the subject of our, that is attentive, as in the quote above of flawless mental engagement with the actual nature of the mind. Dharmakirti, interesting to like quote Dharmakirti, this logic, the Mr. Logic for a meditation quote is neat. Mindfulness of thoughts eradicates them. That's a cool phrase. Instead of like being mindful of the object of thought, the body, feelings, mind, dharmas, being mindful of thoughts themselves, right? It's easier when you look at the other senses. We have seeing and the object seen. But when you have thinking, and what is the referent of a thought? We usually immediately think of the referent of the thought. I had a thought about my mother. We don't think, focus on that thought. So we do that in Mahamudra. We look at, where do thoughts arise, dwell, and depart? Where do they, what are thoughts? Anyways, so they appear as luminosity itself. What a nice statement from a logician using that. What comes to be the way of summing up the Mahayana and the Vajrayana tradition of like emptiness and luminosity. Cynthia.
Yeah, I guess I was also, when I read that line, it made me just think of the fact that sometimes when you look at a thought, it's just that fact that it evaporates right on the spot too. That even when you aren't trying to make it do that, that just happens, right? And
it does tend to. Can you perpetuate a thought as you look at it? Can you actually do that?
And in the Moonbeams book, there are times where I mean, there is one. I think there's a place where he wants you to
Intentionally.
actually intentionally keep the thought so that you can then actually see the
Yeah,
nature of it. I think, but
yeah,
it's very hard to do that because of that automatic sort of
right.
self
You have to
immolation.
repeat it. You have to repeat the sort of energy of the thought.
Or well, or you just have to. I mean, I don't know if it's possible to change that to find times where you can actually have a thought stick around a little longer because part of it may just be that our habits of well, I mean, part of it may be the habit of thinking you do want to let go of the thought, and so therefore that's what happens.
So, is a thought a specifically characterized phenomenon?
Yes,
Does everyone agree with that?
I
No?
agree with that,
Rob?
but
The content of the thought is specifically characterized. The thought itself is actually, I think, more of a general.
Wow, I would have thought the opposite. What, can you explain that? So, if
Because
I'm
the
thinking
content is
about,
unique. The content is unique. The content is different every time. It's what's being made up at that time by the brain basically, or
by
by
concept,
by the fifth con. Yeah, the concept. It's the fifth skanda, right? I
but
mean,
concept is by definition generally characterized.
all right, then I'm dyslexing this thing, and I plead guilty to reversing what's going on. But yeah, I mean, there is definitely a distinction between content
Yeah,
and thought for sure.
right, right.
Um, but yeah, the thought is specific. You're right.
The thought itself is specific,
Yeah,
but the reference of the thought,
because
like
it's
I said, my mother, if I'm thinking about my mother, the mother is a generally characterized phenomenon. It's,
right,
you know, the idea of mother.
but
but the actual thought,
the cognition that produces that content is a specifically characterized phenomena.
Yeah, yeah, a real instant.
Right.
So that was a hint. So what's one of the main characteristics of specifically characterized phenomena?
are they impermanent and momentary or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, they're radically impermanent momentary. So to look at a thought, it's gone. It's,
But then
instantaneous.
what is Tashi Namgyal? Is he? It seemed like he was saying somehow it's possible to look
Well,
and
that's why
without.
I was saying you have to generate it again. You have to try,
Oh,
sort of give rise to the same thought energy over and over again in order
and
to
to
have a
somehow
sense of
catch it. I don't
receiving.
know. It's just I don't. Yeah, I've tried to find and reread that part because it's
Yeah.
it's an
They
interesting.
disappear. When you remember these phrases or parts of that book, they disappear. You can't find them again.
The
Right.
tightrope
Rob,
the tightrope is staying in samadhi through with this. It's keep
yeah,
it's keep it's
doing
keep
it in samadhi,
yeah
What
doing it.
does that mean?
What
If I
that
thinking
there's
while you're in samadhi.
yeah, well, it has to do, I think, a little bit with what you were talking about earlier, where all of a sudden you have this settling of mind, right? That happens to with what you described as withdrawal. When when samadhi is working for me, there's a it kind of it's really hard to describe, but it feels like it's in a sense dense
Yeah,
and
give some other analogies like for it.
there's a sense of denseness. There's a sense of like it's getting a little bit heavy, and it's getting
Yes,
and it's
it's like
getting
a
a
blanket. It's like
yeah
it's being your mind is sort of like blanketed, right?
yeah and but at the same time it's immediate. It's very immediate,
Yeah, it's
and
very clear. Yeah,
and it's
it's
space.
not the dullness. It's not the blanket of dullness.
No, it's the blanket of presence.
Yeah, it's really neat. Rinpoche talks about this. He says you become more and more. He affiliates it with thatness, and that it becomes palpable.
Yeah,
That you begin to sort of have this feeling of awareness or something.
and that's what the little fish we were talking about is darting through.
Yes, yeah, the thoughts. Yeah,
but
You
are
know,
you talking about physical sensation here?
it's a mental
When you say palpable, like Derek, you used the term palpable.
well, I
But it's
do
as if your
sometimes.
mind could feel it.
The mind feels it, but actually sometimes I have to relax my body at times too.
It sort of goes together, yeah.
Because sometimes the body just sort of goes, oh, this is happening, and I
I'm
got to,
just trying to compare with my experience and see
yeah.
if it is or isn't the same thing.
But but
It's more in the head than it is in the body, but sometimes the body catches up.
but like we often use the phrase "my mind was spinning," right? Like when we have a lot of thoughts, like something unusual or intense happens, and the mind like thinks rapidly, And you have this. So there's different types of mental states that we all know and talk about as like having a certain feeling. That the quality of our thoughts have a certain feeling when certain things happen, urgency, so a million things go through your mind. What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And so it's like paying attention to the feeling of thoughts. Are thoughts uh, intense and rapid? Are they scattered? Are they relaxed? Are they smooth? Are they like jagged? That feeling of like, what is the feeling of the thinking?
Okay, because that's, I mean, I guess that seems a little different than what I thought Rob was describing was just more of a general when he was describing. That's why I was curious what he
Well,
meant
he
about.
was talking about the experience that goes with it. I was talking about the different types of thoughts that occur usually up until that experience occurs, because
Hmm,
then the thoughts become much softer and
less. Right.
smoother, right?
Well, and you mentioned that Rinpoche talks about this, and it says, what is can you identify some of the places where that could be looked at more? What you mentioned about thatness, I presume you're talking about Trungpa Rinpoche in this case.
Yeah. If you email me afterwards, I'll find it. But he uses
Okay.
the phrase of cream. He uses the phrase cream. It's like thick cream.
Wow,
And I
I just
think it's in
somehow that
the
one I never
path.
remember. That's cool.
It's in the path is the goal. Maybe if you Google
Oh,
it, you can find it. But
oh,
I
well,
think
I'm
it's in the
I'm
path
working
is
on
the goal.
reviewing that book for other reasons,
Yeah.
so I should
So
run
like
into it.
when I
Because
was
I mean, the
first,
thing is that sometimes, like some of these experiential things, I tend to think are you can get into the area where you need to actually break it. Like, there's certain kinds of feeling tones or whatever that where I tend to think, okay, am I getting into sort
They're
of a yum,
self-induced sort of
yum
things.
territory, and where you need to kind of
Right.
cut it, break it, and then keep going, but not to dwell in it. So that's why I was trying to distinguish which kind of experience you're talking about.
well, it's totally involuntary for like it's not induced. It's not something I try to do.
Yeah, sure.
And the first time when I really noticed it, the analogy for me was like, when you're at the dentist and you get an X-ray, they put that lead thing on your chest.
Hmm.
It's like that, only all over.
Oh, interesting. Uh huh.
That's great. Yeah. Heavy blanket.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Neat. You have some
You know,
awesome background noises the way your audio settings are set up,
for me,
by the way. Yeah.
oh, sorry.
But,
Okay.
oh,
I do have a question, but I don't have to ask it now on a different topic. But
what wild sounds.
there's
There's
just a
something
lot of
about
sirens right now. But
something about your audio settings is making them very cool. Anyway, from the Mahayana Sutra Alamkar, which is by anyone who wrote that book? Do you know your five dharmas? Who wrote the five dharmas? What does the five dharmas refer to? Thank you, Maitreya. Thank you, Mary Beth. Yeah, so the five books of Maitreya are, he has two adornments, two ornaments. This is one of them. Alamkar is an ornament. And this is the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, a collection of excerpts from the Mahayana Sutras. And then he has an adornment of the higher realizations, Abhisamaya Alamkara. And then he has two distinguishings. He has distinguishing the middle from extremes, Madhyancha Vibhanga. And then he has the Dharma, Dharmata, Vibhanga, distinguishing Dharma from their nature, Dharmas from their nature. And then he has the Uttara Tantra, the sublime continuum, which is sometimes called the Ratna Gochar Vibhaga, distinguishing the precious jewel. But anyway, so those are your 5 dharmas. The limpidity, what an interesting term for a translator, limpidity of turbid water does not arise from the outset, but appears only when it is free of impurities. So even turbid water has the potential of limpidity in it. It's an interesting way of translating it. And that limpidity appears when it's freed or clarified of impurities. So it is with natural purity. And the way to it is this, I guess, meaning freeing it of impurities, purifying the natural purity, uncovering what was covered. Samadhi Raja Sutra states, without thoughts, without conceptualization, without an apprehended object, with nothing to show. What have you got? Nothing. The mind, too, is without a referent. Therefore, this is called Samadhi. If Jinaputras means the children of the conqueror. Jina is the conqueror, the Putras, it's really sons, which is gender specific. So anyway, if they cultivate this king of the samadhis, the bodhisattvas, they go beyond conceptualization, which is difficult to transcend. Yeah, how do you go beyond conceptualization? You return to concept, I guess. And gradually non-conceptual primordial wisdom arises by going beyond conceptualization, i.e. in a certain way, then non-conceptual primordial wisdom gradually arises as the natural purity that's cleared or freed of impurities. The Kayatraya Stotra states non-conceptual primordial wisdom alone is asserted by the wise to be samadhi, and the other samadhi does not dwell in authentic reality, but is a distraction. So real samadhi is non-conceptual primordial wisdom. It's pretty clear. Strict. The Shada Sahasrika Prajna Paramita Sutra, something like the 100,000 or whatever. What is the samadhi, mental stillness? Abiding in that samadhi, the mind is unwavering, non-conceptual, and does not become despondent or unhappy. There does not arise the thought, this is what is called the mind. That's like Rinpoche talking about the gap. You don't say, oh, this is a gap. This is the samadhi called mental stillness. Going back to our gloss of shamatha. The mother, which is a way of, the traditional way of referring to the mother of all Prajnaparamita Sutras, the 100,000 verses, states, when bodhisattvas experience transcendent wisdom, they have the samadhi called isolation. So isolation, in the more extensive version of the Vajrayana, there's bodily isolation, speech isolation, and mental isolation. But here we just go right to complete isolation, which is transcendent wisdom. That means isolating from conceptuality, from ignorance. Bodhisattvas who experience that samadhi swiftly become manifestly perfectly enlightened. Not quite sure what the significance of the swiftly is. Like if you do it slowly, it doesn't work. In similar fashion, they have, which is a sort of odd thing to say, they have the samadhi. That is without mind, that is without mental activity, that is unwavering, and which does not see any essential nature with respect to any phenomenon. So this is like the ultimate samadhi. Bodhisattvas, mahasattvas who experience that samadhi swiftly, again, swiftly, become manifestly perfectly enlightened. This is the consummation of the causes that are dhyana and shamatha. Marybeth?
Couldn't it just mean that if you experience that samadhi, then you swiftly become manifestly perfectly enlightened? Not that you have to experience the samadhi swiftly for that stuff to happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So there might be a comma after samadhi.
I always forget my commas, so
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Those who experience samadhi, they swiftly become manifestly perfectly enlightened. It's the consummation of
They could have used a
the
verb,
con.
will, instead of not so much a comma, but just a verb.
Yeah. It is profound due to its isolation, and profound because its depths are difficult to fathom. Subhuti, this which is without form, is the profundity of form. Subhuti. So he's one of the common protagonists, let's say, in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. This which is without feeling, discernment, mental formations, or consciousness is the profundity of consciousness. So these are the five skandhas, obviously. Is the profundity of consciousness, dot, dot, dot. So did he say this is the profundity? In the first section he said it's the profundity of form, so presumably it's the profundity of feeling, discernment, and so forth, not just consciousness. Subhuti, this transcendent wisdom, is totally non-conceptual. The total absence of conceptualization is called Buddha. Interesting they put it that in a small b, so it's like awakened. The total absence of conceptualization is called enlightenment. Synonymous here, since they're defined. Buddha and enlightenment identically. In the Ashta Sahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra, it said, I think it's the 8,000, but cultivating transcendent wisdom does not dwell in form nor feeling, etc. The Pradarshana Anumatodesha Parika states, by their own nature, meditation and recitation with mudras, mandalas, and mantras over many 10 millions of bands will never bring any amount of siddhis. So those are the main aspects of Vajrayana practice: recitation, mudras, mandalas, and mantras. One who dwells in suchness upon abandoning all conceptualization achieves siddhis in this very life and reaches supreme enlightenment. The Samputa, famous Tantra, states, upon examining the status of conceptualization, if in accord with the teachings of the mind Vajra, so the mind Vajra is presumably the form of the Buddha in this sutra, Tantra, an intelligent person then does not engage in conceptualization. For that person, there will, without doubt, be siddhis. Conceptualization takes one to the hell realms. Wow. And one circles around in the ocean of the six classes of existence. Okay, so it's not just a hell realm. If freed from conceptualization, one goes to the absolute space of unstained peace. Sorry. Unstained peace. First class. So cut the web of conceptualization. The Vairochana Abhisambodhi Tantra states, conceptualization acts as the cause of suffering for as long as it is not eliminated. One is not a Buddha in this world, and one cannot be called omniscience. So there's all this disparaging of conceptualization, and a very clear statement of just getting rid of this conceptualization as the way. But in many other places, we see that the absence of conceptualization is not always the path to enlightenment, that there are states without conceptualization which are very much not enlightened states, such as some of the formless realms and deep sleep, things like these, like this. Let's see.
And also the sort of converse of or aspect of conceptualization is that there are also sources that talk about the usefulness of concept in some ways to help bring you to enlightenment, right?
Yes, but I think those sources all acknowledge that one has to then surpass it, as in
Eventually let it go. Okay.
the
Okay.
burning up of the wood in the fire of conceptualization.
But here you're just saying that getting rid of concept alone doesn't guarantee the right destination.
Yeah, it's within the context of samadhi. Yeah.
Right, but you
What
need
is?
you need some concepts in order to know where you're pointing the arrow of your path. You know?
Yeah, as we see over and over again in the next chapter. One is not if for as long as it is not eliminated, one is not a Buddha in this world, and one cannot be called omniscient in the Vajramala, the Vajra Rosary Tantra. It is said, with the exhaustion of all conceptualization, great bliss arises authentically. The Vajrapanya Abhisheka Tantra states in primordial consciousness, free from conceptualization, the jinas of the past have become manifest Buddhas. In that freedom from conceptualization, a sadhu one gains success in secret Matrayana. So anyway, we have a huge number of quotes here that basically repeat the same theme. So I'm going to skip some of them and let's see if Nagarjuna has anything different to say on the other page. Buddhists have said that what authentically interrupts the flow of wholesome and wholesome conceptualization is emptiness. Emptiness performs a function. Interesting way of phrasing that. Shantideva states, when the body, speech, and mind are in isolation, distraction does not occur. Therefore, the world is to be renounced and conceptualization is to be thoroughly abandoned. The Yoga states the mind that constantly eliminates the many conceptualization called samsara settles in meditative equipoise. Sara states shamatha depends upon its cause. Ethical discipline. That's an interesting phrase. That's the sort of traditional view, is that cultivate ethical discipline, and from that shamatha can then be cultivated. Based on that, its essential nature is isolation from mental afflictions and conceptualization. Its cooperative condition is reliance upon the unique features of the stages of mental stillness. Stages or techniques and the antidotes and powers. The benefit is that coarse mental afflictions and suffering are suppressed, not eliminated. Now, here in this context, this is the time for cultivating shamatha by itself. Do your best to keep your mind still without being scattered anywhere. With the body imbued with the vital points. Imbued with the vital points. It's a sort of funny way of saying it. The body imbued with the vital points. Rest your body and mind in a state of comfort and relaxation. If the mind becomes, maybe it's like the vital points of the body are imbued with a state of comfort and relaxation, your body and mind rests or something. Anyway, if the mind becomes scattered, rested upon stillness without letting it become diffused, as if stillness was an object, settling the mind in stillness, having calmed the scattering conceptualization, is shamatha, once again the gloss. In this regard, there is A, flawed, and B, flawless meditation. I think the translators add the A and B. I don't think the author had that. Uses that A, flawed shamatha of the mind. Oh, and this was an interesting section. If the mind has, and once the mind has entered shamatha, even if you are called, you do not hear. So be careful,
Radish curry, anyone?
Yeah. There's this place in the early teaching, the suttas of the Buddha from the Nikayas, the five Nikayas, where there's discussion of how, or in Buddha Ghosh's path of purification, he says if you enter into the dhyana states, nobody can wake you from that It only depends. The only way you can arise from the dhyanas, the absorptions, is two ways. One is when you've determined by yourself beforehand to arise from them. Well, actually, three. Or if the factors that produce it wear off. Or thirdly, if the sangha calls a meeting by ringing the bell. And that otherwise people can try to wake you for, doing all sorts of things. They can poke you with spears and cut you, but you won't wake up. Burn you with fire, you won't.
Bucket of ice on your head.
Yeah, there you go. The ice challenge. At that time, the eyes do not see anything, the mind being unclear. So no vision, the mind being unclear. You do not recall or think anything. Wow. Even though you're in such a state for a long time, you're unaware of the passage of time. So these are the absorption states that are portrayed as flawed shamatha. When you're aroused from that samadhi, it's like waking up from sleep or being restored to consciousness after fainting. You think, now what's happened to me? Where's my radish yogurt? A person who experiences such things is bewildered about shamatha. At first, if that happens only momentarily, it's not a problem, for it is an indication the meditative state is about to arise. There are also accounts of this in the stories of previous masters, such as Tuzun Kempa and others, but it is inappropriate to continue in that, thinking it is meditation, for you cultivate that alone. It acts as a cause for a rebirth as an animal. Imagine, like, you cultivating this very advanced level of absorption, and you're born as an animal. Which is weird because, animals are not particularly in a meditative state. But anyway, alternatively, if you focus the mind in the center of your heart and remain without bringing any thoughts to mind, the mind will remain still without any memories or thoughts arising. Just like that, by the way. You want to try that. Thus, due to the absence of memories and thoughts, the 8 configurations of outer consciousness are unclear. The 8 configurations of outer consciousness, so the outer 8 consciousnesses. There are no other memories or thoughts in the mind. There is simply the discernment that the mind is remaining single-pointedly. But there is no observation of the essential nature of stillness. When you meditate in that way, you will not sense where the sun is moved. And this is said to be similar in some respects to Shravaka cessation, since this is flawless shamatha. The footnote says, I think the author meant flawed. And somehow there's an error in the text that added the less. If at first it happens for a short time, it's not a problem, but it's inappropriate to meditate continually in that way. It's interesting that the translators did not take the option of sort of bracketing the less and saying this is in the text, but it's clearly a mistake. Anyway, flawless shamatha. Well then, what is it like to have flawless shamatha? But wherever the mind is directed, it remains vividly still and luminously clear when meditated in that way. The 8 configurations of consciousness, including the eyes, ears, and so on, are not impeded. Rather, each one is clear. The body and mind are pervaded by bliss with no irritation. Meditation manifests in this way whenever you are meditating. When you are not meditating without needing to arouse yourself, you have a great sense of autonomy. That's an interesting way of describing it. And that is shamatha alone, which is the foundation of meditation. The foundation of meditation is shamatha alone. That's a little bit of an odd phrase. Moreover, by cultivating shamatha, physical and mental bliss arise. With great attachment and craving for that, when great attachment and craving for that bliss arise, by holding it to be supreme, you will be reborn as God in the desire realm. If you sustain it without attachment and craving, it leads to the path. The path. So there's this whole ideology and language around this notion of like actually entering the path, literally entering the path, or actually entering the path, path entry, all these ways of describing path entry. And it's usually described early on in the Shravaka sort of tradition of the 4 stages of stream entry and so forth. But stream entry sort of correlates to the path of seeing. So when they say entering the path, does that mean path of seeing? Or entering the path, does that mean path of accumulation? Sometimes it means actually entering the path of accumulation genuinely, which is odd because we all thought that we entered that path the moment we started meditating and studying. So it's a little bit of an unclear scheme. In that shamatha, by applying yourself to investigation and analysis as antidotes to prevent the mind from scattering. So these terms, investigation and analysis, vitarka and vichara in Sanskrit, are these 2 aspects of mental activity that are necessary to achieve absorption state, and then one suppresses them to achieve the subsequently higher absorptions. But it's interesting that, like in shamatha, you use investigation and analysis. We don't usually think that way, right? How do you have non-conceptual object, which they said earlier? Shamatha has one object, non-conceptualization. So how does that involve investigation and analysis? But here, those are used as antidotes to prevent the mind from scattering. So it's more like the investigation and analysis is applied to that which impedes shamatha, as opposed to the stillness, let's say, which is also this vague, unclear term. It's like, are we focused on stillness? Anyway.
So is it slightly the Sheshin side of
It would
shamatha?
definitely be the Sheshan, and I've yet to find any affiliation of those terms with Sheshan. Someday I'll find, like, the Tibetan for those 2 terms would be really helpful. But anyway, the general scheme, I think, is quite clear in these sort of linguistic questions or conundrums that arise from the way the terms are used. They're not that important. Anyway, by doing that, you prevent the mind from scattering, you'll be imbued with mental joy and well-being, and your mind will remain single-pointedly. This is the first jhana. So this is the entryway into the absorptions. And strangely, he's putting flawless shamatha in the absorptions, rather the other way around. The absorptions in the flawless shamatha section. Whereas sometimes, some texts, like later on in Royal Seal, at least the translation portrays the absorptions as being a sidetrack and like part of flawed shamatha. But clearly, definitively, the absorptions are the key aspect of the traditional path of shamatha and vipassana. But it's interesting, and that's repeated in Mahayana authors, including Shantideva. But it's interesting to see it in a Vajrayana author. So then, transitioning from the first to the second jhana is done by letting go of investigation and analysis, so without the need for those to ward off mental scattering. When there is an inner lucidity to the single-pointed mind, that is the second jhana. Remaining single-pointedly without investigation or analysis and without a sense of either well-being or joy, but with mindfulness, introspection constitutes the third dhyana. So it's not quite clear the full set of factors that are being discussed here, but by sort of working backwards, you can see that the first and the second dhyana possessed well-being, and that is eliminated to transition from the second to third. The more sort of categorical description of the progression of the absorptions is that the first one has investigation and analysis, well-being, mindfulness, and introspection, and then those factors that I just named, and then to go from 1 to 2, you lose investigation and analysis. To go from 2 to 3, you lose the well-being. And there's 2 types. There's mental and physical well-being. And then to go from 3 to 4, pure mindfulness with unwavering mental equanimity and without investigation, analysis, well-being, or sorrow, with neither mental happiness nor unhappiness. So in his scheme, the mental happiness he did not mention on the third one being eliminated. So the third one in his scheme still possessed mental happiness, and the well-being referred to physical. But these are
So is the word joy sometimes also used for that mental happiness?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, and bliss, joy, bliss.
The fourth here says also without respiration.
Yeah, the breath stops. One doesn't breathe. So you got to be
No,
careful that you let people know that, because they may think you're dead and bury you.
I think they're saying it that the breath is no longer an object of meditation.
No, they don't breathe.
They don't breathe.
They don't breathe. I know, medically impossible, total
Right.
impossible. That's what they say.
Wow.
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
And as you were saying
Okay.
before, when you're going into these things, you can sort of set your timing so that you, when you're going to come out. So be sure to think about that breathing thing when you set your timing.
That would
Respirate,
make it a very short session, though.
respirate through the pores.
Yeah, I mean, they say you can stay in there for up to 7 days, or
Wow.
that. There's something about that being like the limit. I don't know. Hard to believe all these things that we read just because you read them. The Bodhisattva Rangjung Dorje states, so interesting to see, like sometimes we call these people Buddhas. You know, we say that Karmapa is the Buddha in living form, right? Here we say Bodhisattva, which is not the same as Buddha. Anyway, that's splitting hairs, as they say. With the antidotes of investigation analysis, you apply yourself to single-pointedness. The result of joy and well-being fully arise. This is the first jhana, the single-pointedness without investigation or analysis, with joy and well-being of inwardly directed lucidity is the second. This term lucidity is not, it's an unusual translation, inwardly directed. Interesting. Single-pointedness with mindfulness and introspection. So, Trempa and Sheshin, free of investigation, analysis, well-being, or suffering, is called the third dhyana. Pure mindfulness with unwavering equanimity. Equanimity is the key feature of the fourth. It's devoid of the 8 faults of investigation and analysis, which is a weird phrase. It's like we know that there's 8 obstacles to shamatha, right? Or is it 8 antidotes? I think it's 8 antidotes. So 8 faults of investigation. Anyway, well-being and
I don't
suffering.
think it matches to the 5.
Yeah, no. The suffering of mental happiness and unhappiness, and the mental pleasure or pain of inhalation and exhalation. It's painful to breathe, right? Sometimes. It's called the fourth dhyana. So it's, the whole thing is odd to have this whole section in here, because it's not something that's practiced in the tradition subsequently. But clearly they were experiencing this. They're writing from their, presumably they're writing from their experience and not just sort of regurgitating, you would think, traditional descriptions. But very interesting. Moreover, when such fine shamatha arises, if it is sustained without attachment or craving, it leads to the path. So here we have this very high level of attainment of the absorption states, the dhyanas, then leading to the path. If you respond with attachment and craving, holding it supreme in practice while thinking this alone is meditation, in the short term you may achieve tainted extrasensory perception and paranormal abilities. So traditionally, when you achieve even the first jhana, you develop paranormal capabilities. You can bend spoons, you can read the minds of others, do remote viewing, things like that. But they're tainted by the fact that you haven't understood emptiness, tainted by still being attached to essence or phenomena is real. But you will not transcend samsara by cultivating the first jhana. You were born in one of the three Brahma worlds. So this is the cosmology system that maybe we can go through very quickly. First one gets you into these three Brahma worlds. So Brahma is the first jhana. You're born in one of the three worlds of so and so. In the second jhana, the third one gets you into another three levels of the form realms. And the fourth jhana, you were born in one of these other three realms. So there's 12 realms of these four jhanas, three each. And you were born in those due to shamatha alone, and non-Buddhist Bumpos and so on are born there too. Non-Buddhists assert the attainment of just that as being the ultimate fruition. It's pretty easy to mistake that as the ultimate fruition, I would think. Then there are the abodes, the pure, so-called pure abodes of the Aryas. Aryas being those who attain the path of seeing and above. And these are the five, including the famous Akanishta. Shamatha by itself does not result in birth there, and ordinary beings do not take birth there, for they solely the abodes of the Aryas. Basically, you have to be an Arya to be born there. Normally, they say bodhisattvas on the levels. On the level means on the bhumis, doesn't mean like we're on the same page as that phrase means today. Let's see, by stopping the discernment. So now we got discernment. Before we had investigation and analysis. Here we have discernment, which harkens to sort of the third skandha. What did they use before? They used discernment as the third skandha. By stopping the discernment, it grasps to the characteristics of luminosity and non-conceptuality, which are the two main qualities of the mind. There is the samapati, and samapati is this general term that means even placement. Sama is evenness or smoothness or the same level, and apati is placing, devoid of discernment. So the still state of mind that does not enter into the third skandha. I think the unstated understanding is that the fourth skandha has already been aborted, which is something that Trungpa Rinpoche describes in the book Glimpses of Abhidharma, interestingly. By blocking all appearances and obtaining causes, presumably meaning the causes of samadhi and shamatha, cultivating consciousness like space. Oh, so this is how to transition into the formless realms. By stopping discernment is the third skandha. Then shift into the formless realms, since discernment is what is discriminate. The object of discernment is forms of various types of the different sense object types. Let's see. You cultivate consciousness like space. There's the samapati, the even placement of boundless consciousness, of the infinity, or the formless realm of boundless consciousness. The first, by meditating without determining either an object or a subject, without determining anything, whatever there arises, samapati, no thingness, nothingness. Upon stopping the course discernment of no thingness, I thought they said there was no more discernment. No, there was the discernment of the characteristics of mind were first to go. Now we have no more discernment of anything, whatever there arises. Nothingness by stopping the course discernment of nothingness, by meditating with the thought that subtle discernment is not non-existent either. By meditating with the thought, rather, that subtle discernment is not non-existent either. Wow, that's weird. Non-existent. That means, I think, by meditating with the thought that it exists. Anyway, one takes birth as a god in the samapati of neither the presence nor absence of discernment. Interesting. Usually this is called neither with or without perception, which makes sense. Discernment, perception. Third skanda. Those individuals regard shamatha alone as supreme. But since the mind is bound by subtle grasping, there is the flaw of not seeing one's own nature with vipassana. Sara states childish people are deceived by mistakes with respect to the indwelling mind. And all beings without exception become thoroughly disenchanted due to the fault of pride. Reality cannot be shown, and the whole world is becoming bewildered by dhyana. I don't know about this whole world thing. That's a little bit exaggerated, maybe, but maybe a lot of people, or maybe a few people, maybe very few people. Anyway, thus, once you have cultivated shamatha by itself, then the greater the shamatha, the greater power and fine qualities of vipassana. If shamatha is weak, the power of vipassana will be weak, just as little rain falls from a small cloud, or small flame burns from a small piece of wood. Therefore, I beg you, now to dispense with recitations and other virtuous practices and do your best to still your mind single-pointedly. How's that? Like, don't bother doing your nundro, don't bother doing your mantra recitations on Vajrayogini. Still your mind. One-pointedly, single-pointedly. Don't bother with all that other mumbo. I just didn't say mumbo jumbo. That other stuff. Interesting. This is a certain very extreme point of view of like, until you've achieved shamatha, doing all these Vajrayana practices and other practices really don't have much benefit. The analogy that's often used is like the speed that a ship can travel over land. You know, sometimes they have to like drag a ship over part of a land when like tides, sort of the sandbars change, you know, and like you have a route that used to be water and now it's like filled in with sand and you have to somehow drag this huge boat over land. It takes a pretty long time. That compared with sailing the boat on the, you know, going on the water in the boat is the difference in speed in terms of accomplishment between practicing mantras with shamatha and without. Thus I have described the objects of shamatha held in common between the sutra and the mantra with the thought of dedicating this virtue and the virtue meditating on these objects, all sentient beings. Recite after me 3 times. I dedicate this virtue to all beings of the 6th class of existence who have been my old mother. That's a little bit discriminatory. I mean, they were my young mothers too. They were my young mother. This concludes the 15th chapter on the cultivation of shamatha. I think from the text, the union of, well, the name of it is the great commentary to Mingyur Dorji's book in the palm of your hand, which I think is called the Union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen these days. Anyway, can we go into Vipassana? We have a little time left. We have 20 some odd minutes. Whatever you think, whatever you recall, whatever you see, the analytical cultivation of Vipassana according to the Pith Instructions, held in common. What an odd phrase. Held in common. Whatever you think, whatever you recall, whatever you see, and whatever you are aware of, observe its essential nature and penetratingly see it as empty. See it as empty, as empty. However, and whatever you may think, however, and whatever you may recall, whatever you see and whatever you're aware of, observe its essential nature and thus penetratingly see it as empty. Then, so those are presumably from the root texts of Mingyur Dorji's Buddha in the palm of your hand. If you remember from last time, we went through the origin of this text, and Mingyur Dorji, this young kid of 10 years old, starts receiving the Sky Dharma Terma cycle. It's an amazing, profound cycle. It's like 16 volumes or something, 12 volumes. Pretty precocious. Anyway, for the explanation of Vipassana is wisdom. That's an interesting phrase. It reminds me in the Kosha by Abhidharma Kosha by Vasubandhu, he says mindfulness is wisdom. So there's a lot of these sort of correlations, synonymous, making these various terms synonymous. Vipassana is wisdom, for which there are two divisions, common and uncommon. The footnote, by the way, at the bottom says the section on uncommon Vipassana is not translated here, for it's treated separately in the following chapter of Karma Jagni's great commentary, which presumably is in the book. What is it? Spacious Path of Freedom and Naked. What's the other one? Naked Awareness. It's in one of those two. I should have looked at that. That's interesting. Okay, on 174, wisdom held in common, the intelligence that investigates and analyzes all outer and inner phenomena is, in some sutra traditions, explained to be wisdom. The Shada Sahasrika Prajnaparnita Sutra has said those blind ones who have listened to the few teachings do not know how to meditate. Who have listened to few teachings. Without having listened, then, with such meditation, on what are you to reflect? Therefore, apply yourself to listening, and from that cause the vast wisdom of meditation in accordance with reflection will arise. So, big insistence in this chapter at the beginning on study, on understanding. That's the preliminary to practicing, well, we'd say meditation in general, but presumably Vipassana in particular. Let's see. Therefore, apply yourself to listening, and from that is the cause, the vast wisdom of meditation, in accordance with reflection, will arise. Usual progression is listening, reflection, wisdom. Here, sort of the second and third arising together. This refers to the wisdom of emptiness. Boom. Moreover, according to both the scriptures and Pith Instructions, drawing from the tantras and scriptural explanations, you should first establish the view. If you do not do so, it is said to be pointless, like shooting an arrow without seeing the target. So that's why we've been going on these extended courses on realizing the view with Chris Wilcox. Theoretically, we should be realizing, understanding the view in order to meditate genuinely. If you do not do so, it is said to be pointless, like shooting an arrow without seeing the target. In this context, however, if you initially realize the view by way of the practice of meditation, as can be found in the Pith Instructions of the earlier Vidyadharas. So that, a long footnote on that, knowledge holders, wisdom holders. There's all these different types. It's a term. It is a term general to Vajrayana, but specifically in the Dzogchen tradition has these 4 levels, and basically refers to the early tantric masters. If you initially realize the view by way of the practice of meditation, then this is profound. The implication is also rare. In this regard, though you may have accumulated a vast store of merit, the collection of skillful means, those are synonymous. If you do not realize the referent of the wisdom of emptiness, the referent of the wisdom of emptiness is emptiness, you will not be liberated from samsara. The Prajnaparnita Sanjaya Gata, it is said, an assembly of a quadrillion blind men without guides do not even know the path, so how could they ever enter the city? Just so, if you lack wisdom, you have no eyes. Without the guide for the other 5 transcendences, you lack the ability to reach enlightenment, which is attained when the store of merit, the collection of skillful means, is imbued with the wisdom of emptiness. Chandrakirti says in his famous text, Entry into the Middle Way, just an entire assembly of blind men can easily lead to its entire destination is easily led by a single individual endowed with sight, so the mind of wisdom adopts the excellent qualities which have no eyes, proceeds to the very state of conquerors. Prajnaparnita Samjaya Gata states, with wisdom you thoroughly understand the nature of phenomena and perfectly transcend all 3 realms of existence. In the other sutra, it says the root of all these seen and unseen excellent qualities of wisdom, therefore no accomplish both, fully embrace wisdom. If darkness is not dispelled by the light of wisdom, you will not become endowed with pure ethical discipline. For the most part, pure ethical discipline without wisdom will be defiled with mental afflictions due to faulty knowledge. If the mind is defiled with false or perverse intelligence, the virtue of patience will not be inclined to abide there. You adopt the behavior of one uninterested in knowing right and wrong, like the famous king who was without excellent qualities. Again, it is said, if there is no wisdom, the five sightless transcendences cannot reach enlightenment, for they lack a guide. When they are fully imbued with wisdom, then they gain sight and they acquire the name of transcendences. Shantideva states the Muni taught this entire system for the sake of wisdom. Therefore, the desired reward of suffering, one should develop wisdom. Although wisdom may refer to mundane wisdom, including knowledge of medicine, sound, logic, and fine arts and architecture in this context, it does not refer to the wisdom of knowing those things. Nor is it the wisdom of the Shravaka, partaker, but is by which one understands that one's own aggregates are impure, unsatisfying, and permanent, identitylessness. Interesting phrasing, saying one's own is a little bit odd.
So these five sightless transcendences are the other five paramitas, right?
That's correct, yeah. They
So
are sightless without
what was
prajna.
what was really cool about the talk was she sort of Eva began it uh, by describing the paramitas as transcendences.
Neat. As transcendent activities.
Yeah,
Did she state that aspect of because they're accompanied by prajna?
it was definitely
Or
implied, you know. But I was so much struck more by how she said everything than what she said.
with her eyes closed?
No, but like
Oh,
like like her gestures were very fluid and graceful and almost theatrical, and she's
yeah.
she's full of joy uh,
Yes.
and enthusiasm. She's totally, involved in what she's saying. Um, but yeah,
Really into it.
that was the first time, and now I'm reading it in the text. But that was the first time I heard the paramitas described as transcendences. It was when she said it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's their terminology that these translators use. Yeah. I mean, other translators use that as well, but to sort of use them in the plural in that way maybe is unusual.
Usually it's used as sort of like an adjective, yeah. But they're changing it where they prefer to use it as like the noun. They like this, replacing the word paramitas really with the word transcendences.
Mm. But anyway, these are these four characteristics. We hear about the three marks of existence. Sometimes we hear about the four marks of existence, which are very close, but not the impure. The impure is a scheme that maps them to the Four Noble Truths in a very clear way. Somehow, the wisdom referred to here is the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of all phenomena, as opposed to realizing these four characteristics about the skandhas. The knowledge that all phenomena are unborn is transcendent wisdom. One who thoroughly knows that phenomena are without inherent nature is one who practices supreme transcendent wisdom. Knowledge of the emptiness of inherent nature, which realizes that the aggregates, elements, and set bases are unborn, is thoroughly explained to be wisdom. Bodhipata Pradipas by Tisha. Regarding the benefits of cultivating the wisdom of emptiness, the sutra says, even if one cultivates transcendent wisdom for as brief a time as the duration of a finger snap, the merit of a bodhisattva or mahasattva increases enormously. It is not equaled by meeting the needs of all the sentient beings dwelling in a billion-fold world system through the practice of generosity, nor establishing them in ethical discipline, nor establishing them in samadhi, nor establishing them in wisdom, nor establishing them in liberation, in the vision of liberating primordial wisdom, nor in the fruit of stream entry, nor in the fruit of once returner, nor non-returner, nor state of an arhat, nor in the state of enlightenment of a Pratyeka Buddha, the merit of one who cultivates this profound transcendent wisdom for just the duration of a finger snap increases far more. Interesting, less there. So presumably at the top of page 178, the reference to establishing them in liberation refers to the accomplishment of a Shravaka, as opposed to the enlightenment of a Pratyeka Buddha, which is then listed separately later. The Tantra states, Shariputra, there's a greater increase in merit from cultivating the samadhi of suchness for the duration of the finger snap than from listening to Dharma for an aeon. By all means, teach this samadhi of suchness to others. All bodhisattvas of enlightenment have been prophesied, without exception, abide in this samadhi. The quality of being prophesied means that they have achieved the 8th bhumi, at which point the Buddhas of all the 10 directions 3 times appear and say, you will be the Buddha so-and-so at such a time, in such a place, and blah, blah, blah. In this other sutra it says, interesting, like here they translate the name of the sutra. In other places they don't. Presumably because they have the Tibetan of the sutra, which they give, but they don't have the Sanskrit for it. Interesting. Not that interesting, probably, to most of us. Entering a session of dhyana for one instant is more meaningful than sacrificing one's life for all the people of the 3 realms. Wow. That's radical. The sutra states there is greater merit from meditating the meaning of Dharma for one day than there is in hearing and reflecting on the teachings for many aeons. Why? Because it distances you from the way of birth and death. So here we've shifted from these last 2 quotes from the focus on the wisdom of emptiness to meditation. Merit of yoga to meditate on emptiness for one session is greater than the store merit from providing the necessities of life for all sentient beings in the 3 realms for as long as they live. Another sutra says it's more powerful to meditate for one day than to read, write, listen, teach, and recite Dharma for an aeon. I'm going to have to print that out and post that above my meditation cushion in very big letters, very big font.
When you were saying that you shifted to meditation, I'm just wondering, it seems like sometimes they say just meditating, and then in some cases they specify meditating on emptiness specifically.
Right. That is the key. Thank you for that. Although in the last quote they did not say that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out, if that was, clearly it's significant, whether it was not, it isn't consistent, so it's not clear whether they're talking about 2 different things. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you drive a 10-wheeler, it's implied. Was that lost on you guys? The 10 wheels of Kshitigarbha Sutra. Anyway, furthermore, if you meditate on the meaning of emptiness and the purpose of meditating on a deity, reciting mantra, making burnt offerings, and so on, it is fulfilled. It is the fulfillment of all the ethical disciplines. Samaya is the triad of hearing, reflecting, meditating, 6 transcendences, and so on. The Hayvajra states there is no meditation nor meditator, nor a deity, nor any mantra. So now the whole thing has just evaporated into space after all these statements of these being the most important things in the world. In a nature that is devoid of conceptual elaboration, deities' mantras are perfectly present. All the 5 Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And another Tantra says, you do not become a yogin with painting, statues, cast images, and the like. But if you apply yourself to bodhicitta, there the yogin becomes divine. So this elevation or different way of understanding the term bodhicitta in the Vajrayana tradition as being like the end all, the be all and the end all. The Tantra of the Ocean of Secret Ambrosia states, what is the purpose of burnt offerings? They bestow sublime cities and overcome conceptualizations, but burnt offerings do not come from burning wood and so forth. Oh, these are ultimate burnt offerings, mental burnt offerings. Another sutra says, if you do not waver for emptiness, the 6 transcendences are encompassed. Another says not thinking is generosity. That's the cool one. It's a neat description of the paramitas. Generosity is not thinking. Discipline is not dwelling as separate. Patience is not categorizing. Enthusiasm is not accepting or rejecting. Non-attachment is meditation. Wisdom is non-conceptualizing.
So
Another
not
sutra, the wise.
categorizing is another way of saying not judging.
Yeah, yeah, not judging. This is taking too long. You're going too slow. Another says the wise meditate in the reality of emptiness, living without reliance upon anything mundane, not dwelling anywhere in the whole of existence. They guard virtuous, ethical discipline. Another says whether or not you have precepts, the absent conceit, or is the ethical discipline of nirvana, and that is pure ethical discipline. Whether or not you have precepts, the absolute absence of conceit is the ethical discipline of nirvana, pure. Another says that one eats the one food that is unfabricated and natural. That's another whole category of food at the grocery store. You have non-GMO, you have non-gluten, you have vegan, you have vegetarian, organic, and now you have unfabricated and natural. Then one is also satisfied by all philosophical tenets. The childish without realization rely upon conventional words. Everything is a sign of one's own mind. That's a great phrase. Everything is a sign of one's own mind. Sarha states reading is that. Memorization and meditation are that. Bearing the scriptures in one's heart is also that. What is that? What the hell is that? Another says it is certain that when you discover the actual nature of the mind, a whole variety of deeds and activities, such as making offerings, torments, and so on, will all be encompassed by this. Another states, as many qualities of joy and happiness as there may be in Buddha's Bodhisattvas, Shravaka, Parteka, Buddha's Deva, and all things, all of them arise from supreme, transcendent wisdom. Phew.
So do we think that that Saraha type thing is where Trungpa got his tendency to use the word that a lot?
Yeah, well, it's not unique. There are other uses of it, but you know, so whether it was Sarah or those other ones, but yeah, it is definitely. He did not make it up. He did not come up with that first. It is a
Right. Evidence of the tradition.
yeah that. But yeah, in other words, that was a big teaching device that he used. That, and they would capitalize it like losing fixation on this and shifting to that. So a little bit more in terms of the way that such wisdom establishes emptiness. Interesting phraseology. Wisdom establishing emptiness. Does emptiness need to be established? Does wisdom do that? Interesting. There is the analytical meditation. Oh, here we go. Learned Panditas. Once again, we have this whole scheme. So the meditation of learned Panditas, which cuts through conceptual elaborations from the outside, and the stabilizing meditation of Kusali yogis, which cuts through conceptual elaborations from within. The Pandita tradition first establishes externally appearing objects as emptiness with the discerning wisdom of mentation. What is that? The discerning wisdom of mentation. Meditation of mind by way of scriptures and reason. Discerning wisdom. Then, as for meditating on inner personal identity list, one establishes this by logical investigation, relies on scriptures and reasoning, and then meditates on its referent. So, implementing the scheme that is encapsulated in the absolute bodhicitta slogans, regard all dharmas as dreams, and also in Atisha's text, the teachings on the Madhyamaka, the middle way, where he goes through the stages of meditation. That is found also in the Lokavatara Sutra. We'll see in the quote. It's like understanding, realizing the emptiness of phenomena, realizing the emptiness of the perceiver, realizing the emptiness of the wisdom that understands the emptiness of the object and perceiver, and then letting go. So here we have the first two of those stages, meditating inner personal identity list. In that regard, there are reasonings to undermine the four extreme views of eternalism, nihilism among non-Buddhists and within Buddhism. So in that regard, in these two schemes, in support of these two frames of phenomena and inner perceiver, remembering that phenomena can be internal as well, so it's not just like external and then internal, it's object, subject. In that regard, there are reasonings to undermine the four extreme views among everyone. And within Buddhism, there are reasons to undermine the views of the lower schools, Vipas, Chandraya, and the ways in which the Madhyamaka undermines the Chittamatrans, and set forth their own middle way system. Now, Madhyamaka Prasangas refute the Swatantrikas while maintaining that their own views free of philosophical assertions. So all they do is refute, they don't assert, and they maintain that there is no other higher view. And I thought they didn't have a view, but anyway, then this Madhyamaka Prasanga view that refutes without asserting. Sakya Pandita, our famous buddy, says if there were a view superior to the view of the transcendences, that view would have to be one that has conceptual elaboration, since the transcendences do not. Now, although most spiritual friends, interesting term, agree that there's no difference between the Mantrayana and Sutrana philosophy. So saying like there's no difference in the view between sutra and mantra. With respect to the view, one lacks the profound methods of the unsurpassed secret Mantrayana. One needs to accumulate merit for one countless aeon in order to realize the view of our tradition. So this is the normal way that Vajrayana is portrayed as having incredibly superior, skillful means compared to Sutrayana. Whereas the view, the understanding of wisdom, is equivalent. It's not held, that view of the view is not held by everyone. Some assert that the view of Vajrayana is different. With the profound methods of secret Mantrayana, one's wisdom becomes the direct realization of emptiness right now. So this is a great and profound distinction. One is not left with a mere aspiration for the view. Now in the secret Mantrayana tradition, conceptual elaborations are cut off from within if one establishes the nature of the inner apprehending mind. So the distinction of the Mantrayana is that conceptual elaborations are cut off from within, as opposed to using logics, all the different reasons. If one establishes the nature of the inner apprehending mind, again, this idea of like establishing something, as wisdom establishes emptiness, somehow we establish the nature of the inner apprehending mind. This proclaims of its own accord the nature of outer apprehended objects. It's an interesting phrase, proclaims of its own accord. For appearances are the luminosity of the mind. So as soon as you realize the nature of the inner apprehending mind, then you realize the nature of what that mind apprehends, which are its luminosities, or is its luminosity. Therefore, the root of all the Dharma of Mantrayana traditions is one's own mind. We'll just do this one quote now. And as in the Lanka Avatar Sutra, the mind that is stirred up by habitual propensities emerges as appearances that seem to be real, but they are not real, for they are the mind itself to see external objects. It's a mistake. So here we come upon the view that there are no external objects, which we often think is the unique view of the Chitta Mantra, but is actually the common view of all of Chitta Mantra, Madhyamaka, and Vajrayana. The distinction being that the Chitta Mantra says the mind is real, the true mind is real, and the Madhyamaka does not assert anything about the situation. It just refutes the reality of external objects, it refutes the nature of the mind, and so forth. So So let's pause there, and we'll just take it from there next week on page 183. Oh, sorry. Next week I will be in Maine at the Profound Treasury Retreat Land. We have a vacation next week. I was honored to be asked by Judy to teach at one of their elective classes there next week. So I'll be hanging out at the beach all day, except for like a little bit, a couple of days. Any final comments, questions? So we'll skip next week and reconnoiter on June 30th. No, June 23. June 23rd.
I was just noticing that it's interesting that they came back to the, skillful means of the Vajrayana here in this last couple paragraphs. Whereas, well, I don't know if it was in the prior text or just in some of the quotes of the prior part of this text, where they had been kind of dismissing a lot of the skillful means of the Vajrayana as not as powerful as this other
Yeah,
stuff.
we had like a zillion quotes about, all the mantras and mudras and burnt offerings these are nothing compared to wisdom. And now we have this extolling of the skillful means of the mantrana. There's a but there, right?
I presume the distinction is that if all of that is done without wisdom, without transcendent wisdom, then you don't get the full benefit,
Yeah, the old chicken and the egg thing, huh?
I
I'm still
guess.
waiting to see which comes first. I ordered them both
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
simultaneously. Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy ways of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the radiance wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you. Have a great couple of weeks and see you in 2 weeks.
Have a nice time in Maine.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye.